Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to another Dollar Bin Bandit Wednesday on September 7th. We hope you all had a great Labor Day weekend. I am Joe Marcello.
I'm Warren Phillips.
I'm Mike Farah.
And like I said last week, we're going to help make the end of the summer a little less painless. A little less painful, that's what I meant to say. And what better way to do that than with a returning guest? We're talking to none other than Fabian Nicieza. Now, you may know Fabian from his various work on X-Men titles, his introduction of Deadpool, Shatterstar, and Domino. And you may also know him from a previous interview on the Dollar Bin Bandits.
Yes, I missed that original interview, so it was so cool to talk to him. I actually got to meet him at Terrificon. Now to sit and pick his brain a little bit about New Warriors, the character Rage, which I was always a big fan of. So cool to hear his stories, and what a nice guy to take the time again to speak with us.
Yeah, I picked his brain a little bit more on the X-Men crossovers, like X-Cutioner song and all of those. He had a lot of interesting things to say there. Definitely enjoyed Oren's little detour with Rage, which was cool, and I'm sure unexpected on his part. And then we get into his new novel, which is called The Self-Made Widow, which is a sequel to his novel from last year, Suburban Dicks, which is getting, hopefully, a adaptation into a TV show. So lots going on with Fabian. So let's get to it. This is Fabian Nicieza.
Well, I'll start saying, sir, thank you again for joining us. We're so happy to speak to you.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I had some questions I didn't get had last time, so please don't mind me as I ramble on a bit about how much I love your career. Wanted to ask a question, sort of a New Warriors question, but a team book question in general, because you've worked on a few of them. With the team books, is it is it Marvel? Who decides the solo characters to push going forward, or is it by fan response to the book and who this may be talking about more?
I have no clue what they do nowadays or how they make their decisions publishing wise nowadays. So we're looking at 25, 30 years ago, as far as my day-to-day involvement with the publishing decisions that were being made.
Right.
And the truth is, it was just a bit of a combination of everything you cite. It was a little bit of editorial preference, creative preference, fan interest. And you kind of throw all those things into a hopper and you just roll it around and you see what you get. Like Nightcrawler was Dave Cockrum's go-to character when they started the relaunch of Uncanny X-Men. When Byrne took over, he really liked Wolverine and drawing Wolverine. So guess what? Wolverine became the go-to character in the way the artist was determining how the visual compositions of panels were going to go, and Chris writes to that. However, it's working out with the artist he's working with, and boom, there you go. Who's Nightcrawler? Nobody cares about Nightcrawler anymore, and Wolverine becomes a star.
Right.
So it really varies. I sometimes it's me pitching an idea back in the day, even up through Thunderbolts. I'd be pitching a miniseries spinoff, and sometimes they said yes, and other times they said no. So back in the '90s, you could pitch anything, and they'd say yes because they were just printing money back then. But in the aughts, it got a little tighter. Like I wanted to do a Citizen V and the V Battalion miniseries, and they all said, yeah, let's do it, let's go for it. So we ended up doing two of them. I wanted to do a Moonstone limited series. They said no. And I had the whole story broken down. I thought it really was a good, fun, solid story, but they didn't want to do it because they didn't think it would have enough sales impact, and that's fine. It is what it is. How they make their decisions nowadays, I got no idea.
Were there ever any characters that you saw kind of get pushed that you kind of scratched your head and were like, really?
I'd have to really think about that. Not necessarily. I am one of those that firmly believes that given the right creative and editorial direction, almost any character in the Marvel or DC universe has a viable 4 or 5 issue story to tell in them. That doesn't mean they necessarily warrant a monthly comic because by issue 12 you really may be tapping that well pretty dry depending on who the character is. But there's this, I could do a 4-issue miniseries on Turner D-Century tomorrow. You know what I mean? There's always something there that you can look at and figure out, and especially if you're working well in conjunction with an editor who brings their own ideas and can really help hone your ideas, and an artist who's enthusiastic about the work and expands on everything that you're putting on the table to begin with.
Now, as Oren said, you broke in on team books, and a lot of your work has been on team books, although some on solo. But one of your early ones was Nomad. I think sort of breaking in between, Avengers, New Warriors, Alpha Flight. What was it about Nomad that you wanted to take as a solo character from in between what you were doing on the team books?
Well, first of all, Nomad was a team book because he had Bucky on his back in the backpack. So him and the baby made a team. She was a terrible shot. She just couldn't. She's nowhere near a good a shot as Charlton Heston. But I loved the idea of the 50s Cap and Bucky from the days those original comics came out. When Steve Englehart and Sal Buscema were working on Captain America, I bought that whole storyline off the newsstand racks. I wasn't even a monthly Captain America reader at all. I'd occasionally pick up a Captain America comic if it looked interesting, and that storyline just jumped out at me and my brother on the rack, so we bought it. And I loved the concept of those two characters, and I saw they did other stuff with the Steve Rogers character, which I wasn't a big fan of because too much of it was too predictable. And then luckily, Mark DeMatteis brought the character back in Captain America when he was doing the run with Mike Zeck. And Mark is first, he's a wonderful person, but he's an excellent, smart writer. And he saw what the true potential for this character was. The true potential for the character is not becoming the grand dictator Adolf Hitler of America, which is what they did with Steve Rogers' doppelganger. The real strength in developing a character like that is trying to make them find the right way to survive and thrive in a world that is not what they think it should be or they envisioned it would be, and then start feeling guilt about the way they thought and acted in their past as they start to learn more about the present. And I love that concept, and it was always there but never fully played with because Jack Monroe was a supporting character in Captain America. He only appeared occasionally. What that meant is by the time I started working at Marvel in 1985, there was an opportunity to try to do something with that character. And little by little, as I became friendlier with Mark Grunwald over the course of the first couple of years I was there, I would bounce some of my thoughts about it off of him, and he was very enthusiastic about it because he liked Jack Monroe and he used him, but he never would have used him the way I had planned or wanted to use him. And I had rough sketches and drawings of the costume from like the revised version of the costume way before I even sold the first Marvel Comics Presents story. And the Marvel Comics Presents story that I wrote, I think Javier Saltares drew it, was actually a bastardization of a story that a Robin story for DC that I had tried to sell to New Talent Showcase when I first got out of college in 1983. And that exact same story basically was done with Robin and Dick Grayson. And the editor of New Talent Showcase was a man named Sal Amendola. He liked the story so much that he actually called me to have a meeting with him at his office at DC. Now, I just got out of college. I was super psyched. Whoa, this is my big chance. Here I come. I'm going to write Crisis Before Marv Wolfman does. And I went to his office, and he had my plot pinned on his bulletin board behind me. And the first words out of his mouth were, I want to tell you that I'm not able to buy your story because it touches on way too many subjects that are too dicey for DC right now, and for Robin as a character because of his licensing stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I was so impressed by your story that I have it behind me because I want to refer to it and talk to other people about it. So if you have an opportunity to do more pitching, whatever, blah, 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 pitch. So I said, okay, fair enough, fantastic, yada, yada. I was disappointed, but I was also excited. As often happens in the creative world, you get a no, but at least leave a door open for a yes, which is great, because most of the times we just get a no, and half the times that we get a no, we don't even get a reason why. So you're in the wilderness, you know. So of course, I tried to pitch Sal stories after that, and he was fired by DC like a month and a half later. So there went that opportunity. Right? But after I got my job at Marvel, I just said, this story works really well for Nomad. More importantly, it lets me springboard into a mini series that I could develop off of this 8-page story that was a Nomad miniseries. It wasn't a Robin miniseries that I tailored to Nomad. It was a Nomad miniseries. So I just used that story as my starting point, and between that story appearing in Marvel Comics Presents and the first issue of the first miniseries, there was a couple other little backups I did. I did an annual backup with Nomad. I had him basically, I had set that he was in Alaska, so I already started my map in my head as to where he was going to be going. It's not a matter of team book or a superhero book or anything like that. I just felt like the character would give me an opportunity to tell the kinds of stories that I wanted to explore outside of the bigger playground that is Marvel Comics, and B, it would let me tell the kinds of stories that Marvel I felt wasn't telling enough of. And I'm thought of as an incredibly absurdly mediocre mainstream guy, but during my time at Marvel, I pushed a lot of buttons, and I tried to push a lot of envelopes, but I did it within the system, so you didn't hear about it much. It wasn't an outside yakking. It was an internal debate, discussion, prodding, pushing, trying to get us to do more and different things and more in different kinds of stories. I felt we had lost our way in the 80s, especially when I started working there in 85. I felt we had lost our way, that we were no longer the company that would have the first African American character, you know, in a comic, that would have the first drug story in a comic. I mean, so I felt like we needed to get back to that a little more, which is ironic because it ultimately caused tremendous problems with Nomad as a book and with me as a writer and employee at Marvel, because you know, I started pushing it, specifically pushing harder at a time when the company's owners, who were not Marvel Comics, it was scumbag billionaire Ron Perlman, they wanted less and less of that because they were fearful that it would damage their stock price. As ludicrous as it sounds, that's exactly the reason they maintain for not wanting to do anything in the books. So anyway, Nomad was a great opportunity for me at the time to just flex muscles that I didn't have yet. It's the only book I've ever written in my career that I say I would probably relish the opportunity to write it again, because I think I would write it much better now that I'm older, better, more perspective, more experience, more everything. But that being said, for its time, it pushed a lot of envelopes for Marvel, a lot of limits within what a code approved comic could be considered and what Marvel would allow themselves to do. You know, each issue for the most part had its own little theme that we tried to tackle, and many of them were you know, ripped from the headlines kinds of things. That just, you couldn't really have done that even with Spider-Man or Daredevil in the same way that you could with Nomad.
And to that point, one character that you worked on that I liked a lot, because it was somebody at almost the same age as me, but the character was Rage, who was, you know, young, felt, because he was indestructible, like young kids do, and somewhat confused and angry at the world, like teenagers can feel. And I thought the way he was handled, I liked when he was sort of pushed in the books a lot. What were your thoughts on the character, and could he have been
Well,
you?
Rage was a pretty a pretty polarizing character in the offices. A lot of people didn't like him.
Okay.
I was not one of those. I liked him a lot. I never would have asked to take him for New Warriors if I didn't like him.
Right.
The problem with the reason a lot of people didn't like Rage is because they felt he was forced on the Avengers. Larry Hama, who created Rage, was forcing him on the Avengers. They felt he wasn't a prime time character that deserved a slot on the Avengers. You can't argue that because it's accurate, you know. And the real flummoxing thing for the character and for Larry, I think, is that he introduced Rage in a way that it was a 13-year-old boy having to pretend he was an adult among adults.
Right.
And that almost automatically is going to lead you into territory where your character won't be likable. They won't say the right thing or do the right thing because they know they're a 13-year-old pretending to be an adult, but the adults don't know that. I felt he would be a much better fit in New Warriors because he could be the age he was. And I think I wish in hindsight, I wish Derek Robertson, who was drawing the book while Rage was in it, hadn't changed the way Paul Ryan was drawing them, because Paul Ryan was drawing them to look like he was a 30-year-old massive boxer wrestler type guy, and Derek drew him to look a little more baby faced, a little more doughy, less threatening, less menacing, less gruff, and it played off well when he's hanging out with the other characters because he looked like a steroid overgrown boy. But it didn't play as well in terms of what the dynamics of that character was. That being said, he didn't need to look like an adult as much anymore because he wasn't among adults. He didn't need to look tough and bigger because he was alongside Thor and Captain America, because now he was alongside Speedball, and Nova. So he could look like a big dopey kid, and that was okay because he was among dopey kids. And it was fun. I liked him. I thought he was an interesting character. I still do. They haven't done much with him, I don't think, in 30 years. They haven't done much with any of the New Warriors other than Nova in 30 years, and that's fine by me.
Right.
Because anytime they try to do anything, I'm not a big fan of it. So I thought the character worked really well in New Warriors, more so than he did in Avengers.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Not to continue with the dichotomy, even though we are, as I look at our questions, between team books and solo books, but or solo characters, even within team books. But I wanted to ask you about some of the X-Men crossovers, just in a general sense. You were contributors or contributor to X-Cutioner's song, Phalanx Covenant, Age of Apocalypse. Looking back on those, what were your thoughts about them as, storytelling devices? Did you feel they were successful, or were they sort of forced upon the books to, juice sales? And if,
a little of everything.
And what were your favorites?
I think some of them were incredibly successful, both creatively, and specifically, and not creatively and financially, obviously financially, but certainly some of them were successful creatively. More importantly, many of them were successful in terms of the long-term ramifications on the books and the characters. And that's when you did something well. And the quality is always subjective, but when you're still referencing stories 30 years later, you did something well. If you're still referencing Silver Surfer and Galactus trilogy from the original FF in the 60s, 40, 50 years later, you did something right, and to this day, we still have a lot of threads from specifically X-Cutioner's song and Fatal Attractions, and to a lesser extent, but still the Onslaught one that I wasn't a part of because I'd already left by then. Those things still have ramifications on the characters and the titles to this day. I they were always forced on us as part of the budgetary expectations that the company's publishing revenue had to meet. And we knew that an X crossover was going to increase the budgetary returns by X percentage for that quarter. I really had a problem with it when they started increasing the quantity of them. So we went straight from Fatal Attractions literally a month later into Blood Ties, and that was really infuriating to all of us, because it wasn't organic to the creative process, and it was totally forced on us because if I recall, something else got taken out of the budget that was going to be in the fourth quarter, and that meant that we had to increase some revenue in the fourth quarter, and we were coming right off of Fatal Attractions, which we knew was going to sell X amount of copies, no pun intended, and was going to generate that revenue, increase the revenue generation for the third quarter budget. So what the hell, leave the fourth quarter budget as is. If it drops a little bit, that's fine, because the third quarter generated 10-15% more than what you expected. No, that's not how those assholes work. So yes, the third quarter generated 15% more revenue, but we want the fourth quarter to generate 20% more revenue. You can't do that without an X crossover. Ding, ding, ding. Guess what? You're going to have another X crossover. And it's the same exact rationale that went into the Winky Dink covers, as I call them. What started as a really fun, smart proposal from the marketing department to do one or two a year, turned into one a quarter. Okay, we can do one a quarter. That's not too bad out of your whole publishing line. Oh, let's do one a month then. All right, we can do one a month. Let's do 2 or 3 a month. All of a sudden, once they start seeing your sales go up because you had a glow in the dark cover, then they want everything to have a glow in the dark cover. And it just becomes really frustrating in that you're caught between a rock and a hard place, because you are employed by the company, you're being paid by the company, and your job is to perform for the company like a dancing monkey. And while you're doing that, you hope that you're a good enough dancer that you can perform for yourself at certain points in time as well. And the monkeys were getting paid really well, so we couldn't whine too much about it, because we were making a lot of money, the people who were working on the comics back then. So we were making the company a lot of money, but we were making ourselves a lot of money too. So you gotta be cautious about how much you want to whine and complain about them. I didn't give any of the money back. Let's put it that way. I wrote more checks to charity on a yearly basis because I could, but I didn't give the money back. I didn't say, no, Ron Perlman, this is too much money for me. Here, take some of these X
Please keep this
royalties
for
back.
yourself.
You need them more than
Yeah.
me, whilst you're trying to drive every company you own into bankruptcy on fake stock inflations. Anyway, so they varied in my recollections between enthusiasm and excitement, mostly for the early ones that I was a major part of, and diminishing interest and returns on the latter ones that I wasn't. Simple as that. X-Cutioner song was like 99% me in terms of its breakdown and literally breaking down what was going to happen in each issue. Taking that to a writers conference where all of us piped in, and I cut here and trimmed here and there, and then gave everyone back outlines for each issue that gave them a rough idea of what they had to do in their books. Fatal Attractions was probably the most collaborative of all of them, because all of us figured out what each of our issues would be, and because they were it was 5 like one issue self-contained stories, which was great. And each of us were able to determine what we wanted our individual stories to be, and then toss ideas out that we weren't even going to necessarily be able to use in our book, but would work for someone else's book. Peter David tosses the idea about Magneto pulling Wolverine's skeleton out of his body, and that's going to end up in my book. It's not going to end up in X Factor, So that was a good one for me, because everyone got involved and everyone had their own piece of the pie, as it were. After that, they're just a tremendous blur. Phalanx Covenant, and then Age of Apocalypse happened after Phalanx Covenant, right? Phalanx Covenant I had nothing to do with. It was all Scott and Bob. I could care less. I had no interest in it whatsoever. I had no interest in the Phalanx. I had no interest in the Warlock as a New Mutants character. I didn't care. The only reason I remember anything about Fallon's Covenant is because Tony Daniels' art just seemed to kick it up a notch right around that time, and the issues he was doing for that crossover were really sweet because you just saw him make that leap, which happens a lot with artists after 6 or 8 issues. They just make that they just, it clicks in their head, and they start to get a cleaner and more dynamic and better storytelling and panel layouts. And that happened during Fallon's Covenant, Tony. I don't even remember. We introduced different Generation X characters in each book, right? I don't even remember which ones I introduced in mine. I don't even, whatever. I don't care. It's 30 years ago. Seriously.
Weren't you a big fan of Covenants, at least?
Of what?
Of Covenants? Just in general, Covenants.
No, I'm not a fan of Phalanx or Covenants. I don't want either one of them in my comics. And Age of Apocalypse was a gigantic cluster F. I was not happy in my role in the books at the time. We were having some problems between all of us. I love the idea. When Bob bounced the idea off of me, I loved it, but I did not like how him and Scott went off on their own to start to percolate it. And it's not all on them, because I made it plainly clear that I was having less and less interest in working with them. I kind of wanted to just be left alone for a little while and get to write my books for a little while, and it just wasn't going to happen. There's never been a character in someone else's book that Scott Lobdell didn't want to take. Never. Even if he has 20 characters in his book, if he sees a character in another book, he wants to take it. And it just became really annoying and frustrating. So I thought Age of Apocalypse was a great idea, and it was a great publishing program. I was never happy with the actual story itself. I was never happy with how we did the work and the process of getting it done. We had no ending almost 3/4 of the way through the story. We still didn't know what our ending was because Scott and Bob couldn't figure it out, and I wasn't about to help. So it wasn't an enjoyable experience. I got fired off X-Force in the middle of Age of Apocalypse, so I knew I wouldn't be coming back to X-Force while I was writing Gambit and the Externals. So it was a big F you, my time is winding up. I'm going to milk a few more issues of X-Men out, mostly because there was a few more stories I wanted to tell, and I knew we had Paul Smith lined up to guest pencil a couple issues, and I really wanted to work with Paul Smith. But I knew my time was coming due with the X-Men, and I was going to get to kind of write. I had a leeway. I had a little bridge that I was going to get to determine when I would quit. If I waited too long, I was going to get fired. But if I quit too soon, why would I? I'm leaving 3 issues worth of royalty checks on the table, and I didn't feel like doing that at that point because I was going from like writing 6 books a month with a full-time job to writing no books with no full-time jobs. So I made the decision that 45 was going to be my last issue.
Now, I spoke to some folks who were working at the time, and they kind of felt that the people writing the X books were sort of their own separate entity in Marvel, and then there's other people working on other stuff. Did you ever get the feeling that you guys were sort of separate?
Yes, absolutely, because Bob didn't want to share the toys too much with others in the playground. Right. He wanted it to be almost like a separate little fiefdom. And I get it from an editorial standpoint, because it's much easier to manage and control. Right. Taking into account you're asking a lot out of this editor. Okay, he's got a lot of responsibility and he's got a lot of burdens on his back. And Bob and I had lots of problems creatively, but I've never had problems with him as a person and a friend. It's always been a weird little dynamic, but I'll defend Bob to the death as far as his editorial responsibilities are concerned and how hard he worked at that job. But I'll never defend at all how he handled his editorial work, like creatively with me as a writer. That'll always be a fun little dynamic between us. But why would Bob want to give every Tom, Dick, and Harry the chance to use the X-Men? Because in an 80 title line, you'd end up having 25 titles that want to use every other character from your line, and then you got to read all of those plots to approve them, read all of those scripts to approve them, coordinate the appearance to make sure that it doesn't contradict or fits in with your own continuity. They couldn't even handle their own continuity in their 8 titles or 9 titles, the X Office. They contradicted themselves on a weekly basis. You know, they had Mr. Sinister appear like 6 times in 1 month or something. It was just a complete mess. So how are you going to do that with the rest of the line? Because every Danny Fingerrod's going to want to use every X-Men in every issue of Darkhawk. Everyone's going to start clawing at you and picking away at you. It's a pain in the ass. So Bob would dole it out like a Godfather doles out, cannolis. Here, you get a cannoli. Okay, man, don't ask me for a cannoli again for a few months. Okay, you get one. And I get that. I do. I really do. If other people complain about that, tough nuts.
Yeah.
You don't have that job, and you don't have that responsibility. He was expected to generate over 30% or more of the company's entire publishing revenue for the year. I mean, come on, like,
Right.
it's just a load. It's a bear.
Yeah.
So if there's a writer on another book that is going to complain about that, I get why you're complaining, but nerds to you, tough luck. Be a good enough writer that he wants to hire you to work on the books. That's what you got to do.
Now, did you guys also kind of get a pick of the litter? Like if there was an artist doing another book, and you guys were like, wow, he would look good.
Yeah, he stole artists all the time.
Okay.
I mean,
how does that work? I mean,
how does it work?
Yeah.
An editor on the higher selling books or more popular characters looks at an artist working on a book, whether it be for your own company or another company, and says to themselves, I'd like that artist to work on my books.
Right.
And then they either go behind an editor's back and call the artist directly and see and feel them out, or they go up front to the editor and say, I really want to steal your artist. What's your situation with him? And it happened both ways all the time. And Bob stole artists all the time. It's the Spider Office stole artists too. Everybody, most of the artists wanted to work on Spider-Man or the X books because they were selling so many copies that you were making really good royalties off of it.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want to make an extra $5,000-$10,000 a month working on characters you liked since you were a kid? I mean, come on, it's not rocket science, guys. It's commercial art and creative commerce. I mean, so you see Greg Capullo getting better and better every single month on Quasar, and Len Kaminsky, who's editing the book for Howard Mackey, and Mark Grunwald, who's writing the book. They know it's just a matter of time, before he gets stolen. But the Image guys leaving all at once created a void that needed to be filled quickly, and that's when you stole Capullo. Stroman, Casada, Andy Kubert, Adam Kubert, all of them just all at once got sucked into the X vacuum. But that was rare. Usually it was a book at a time, it was rare. And even that being said, guys, look how many difficulties they had finding a monthly artist on X Factor or a monthly artist on Excalibur. Those books suffered quite a bit. X-Force suffered a bit for several months after Capullo left to go draw Spawn crap he was going to draw. That X-Force suffered for several months until we landed on Tony, and Tony improved. So there was a lot of titles being done by all the companies back then. There were more new companies popping up, like Valiant and Dark Horse expanding its workload, and as a result, there was a lot more competition to try to find artists and hire the right artists.
Right. Now, as a writer, when there's sort of like a shock to the system, like there was when the Image guys jumped, and like you said, the guys were pulled in. When you suddenly have a new guy you're working with like that, how quickly do you have to build a rapport with them that you feel comfortable that they're, capturing?
It varies. It really varies. Sometimes you get a rapport with an artist with your very first issue.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes 3-4 issues max. and sometimes it never happens. So it really does vary, and different artists. I have felt different levels of community, of bonding,
Right.
a creative intermeshing with different artists. Some more than others, and I'm not going to name names. It's just
Right.
it's just very natural. You can ask them, and they'll say the same exact thing about writers. Some they'll never bond with at all. Some it takes a few issues. Some you feel like clicks right off the bat.
Right. Makes sense.
This may be an associated question, and you already dug into it a little bit, but I just wanted to extend the line of questioning. Was on X-Force after Rob left, and Greg Capullo came in, and you had new, not exactly, but
Yeah, back it up. Rob's last issue he drew of X-Force was X-Force number 6, right? Or 7.
true.
He did the layouts for the issue Mike Mignola drew. And
Right.
he did really rough thumbnails, possibly for the first issue Pasella drew, but he didn't draw the book after that. Okay. So he wasn't drawing the book from issue 8 all the way through issue 14 when Greg came along.
Yes. I guess what I meant, was there someone specific that drew all those issues, or it was kind of
No,
an
we had
amalgam?
Pasella, who was doing his Liefeld impersonation for several issues to try to create some semblance of cohesion to what had been done before. Terry Shoemaker drew an issue, and he's not a Rob clone at all. And then Greg came aboard. But really, a lot of the burden was on Mark Pasella. He had a tough gig. He had to draw the book really fast, and he had to try to draw it in someone else's style.
Sure.
And that landed on his shoulders. And Mark was a nice guy, and I think he hurt his own career by drawing that way. And that's not fair, but it was what was asked of him, what he expected of himself to provide, and that was it. But there was no way I wanted that look to be the ongoing look for the book. I wanted it to be. I thought the book should maintain that flair and that style, but knowing Greg was coming aboard, I knew that he would be able to provide that exaggerated flair and energy that Rob and Mark provided the book. But I also knew that he would be able to draw a lot more of what was needed to make it a better looking, cohesive team book.
Yeah. Well, what I appreciated about when Greg came on board, and I don't think, I'm not sure if it was him specifically or your collaboration with him or where you wanted to take the book, but it felt, not that it didn't feel fun before, but I thought it felt especially fun and light. Obviously they're dealing with, supervillains and all kinds of stuff, but the new costumes that came in and sort of the banter, it just seemed to be a lot of fun, to be absolutely honest about it. And I know you told me that, your sort of tenure on the book kind of got chopped off. This was after Greg had left, but was that time, was it for you guys? Did you guys hit this pace and in terms of...
I firmly believe that Greg and I would have taken that book to even greater heights had we had a chance to work on it together longer. It's really easy though, guys. When you're working with an artist that is as good as Greg is now, was then, is just a phenomenally excellent artist. It makes everything you do tremendously easier. Okay. Every writer's best work comes when they're working with an excellent artist. And there's no secret as to why. Better storytelling, better camera movement between panels, better emoting from the characters, more dynamic artwork that provides more energy to the pages you're reading. It's all there. And Greg is so good that those issues were just phenomenally fun. I liked the living hell out of them. it would have been a better book over the long haul had we been able to stick together with it. That's not putting Tony down or anything else. I mean, Tony was a super young artist who really was cutting his teeth and learning how to draw comics on a top 10 selling title for Modern Comics. I mean, you know, if you look at Tony's first work from X-Force Annual 2 and his first few issues that he did, him and Matt Broom were bouncing back and forth with different issues between 26 and 29 or something. If you look at his initial issues, 30, 31, 32, and then you look at 43, 44, it's night and day, the Tony's improvement. And it's what we were talking about before. So Tony's a phenomenal artist who became a phenomenal artist. Don't get me wrong, but the Capullo was already there. You know, he took the excellent work he was already doing on Quasar, and he just kicked it up a notch in terms of the pouches and the muscles and the lines. More lines, just more lines per panel. But he never ever sacrificed the storytelling, and that's the key. The key is that it's really easy to draw a giant muscle-bound figure shouting on a page and leaping forward. It's a lot harder to do it where it flows logically from the panel that came before it and the panel that follows it, and that's what a good artist and a good storyteller can do. And that's what Greg did. He didn't sacrifice or skimp on the octane. You know, there was plenty of snarling and spittle going on those pages, but you understood what happened in the panel before, what was happening in the panel you were looking at, and what's going to happen in the panel afterwards. You knew what was going on. And you know, that makes it easier for the writer too, because then they don't have to worry about the script having to bridge those gaps between what the storytelling isn't telling you.
Yeah, I just remember such clarity of storytelling, like you're saying, but the energy of that book at that time was, it was in different parts of the era. It was always, you know, the energy was always fantastically high. But they're just sort of kind of a pivot, I think, probably a pivot away from Rob and the fill-in. I hate to use fill-in artists because, you know, they do such.
They
great
weren't
work.
really fill-in artists. Mark Casella wasn't a fill-in artist. Mark Casella was drawing the damn book, you know?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
He did it for several months.
Right.
But look, it's just. I mean, Rob's energy and enthusiasm was tremendous, but Rob has always struggled to maintain his focus. Okay. And when he's focused, he's phenomenally fun.
Sure.
And really energetic and exciting, and can make a 12-year-old and make a 45-year-old as if they were a 12-year-old. Am I allowed to say jism on dollar?
Hey, why not?
You just did.
The audience is going to hear beep and they go, "What do you say? What do you say?" And the problem has always been and was that first year focus. That's all.
Yeah, sure.
It's really hard to maintain focus on a monthly comic book when you're writing, penciling it, and for a time inking it also, when you're trying to start a new comic book company. Go figure. Those two things are a little bit in conflict with each other. So the focus really wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And I understand why it wasn't there, but it was reflected on the pages of the book. All right, you can look at any one of those issues in the first 6 and have a real clear and easy understanding as to what he actually did versus what a group of other people did to pitch in. You know, I know that I was scripting off of really, and I'm liberal with the definition of the word really, loose layouts. Okay. And that's not fair to me because I'm supposed to be dialoguing, and sometimes I got a circle and a stick, and that's telling me who the character is in the panel. It's not easy to dialogue off of a circle and a stick unless you are writing the wonderful creation Howard Mackey and I came up with, which was Circle Man and Stick Boy. Because Circle Man and Stick Boy was going to be the writer artist driven book where the writers were the artists and we were going to make a statement about circles and sticks. but we just never could sell it to Tom. He never wanted us to do Circle Man and Stick Boy. It just makes it harder to do. That's all. That's
Sure.
all. It makes it harder, which makes it less fun. So I didn't have fun the first year of X-Force. It was a grind. The whole thing was a grind. So what do you think is going to happen to me as a writer when I get Greg Capullo coming in on a book I'm finally plotting myself, you know? And our first story arc together is X-Cutioner song, which
Right.
you know is blowing everything up in a really fun, exciting way. And we were working on the books, writing them and creating them for 12-year-olds. We knew that. You were 12 years old. You were 10 years old. You were 14 years old. That's who we were working for. We weren't doing them for the 40-year-old X-Men reader who'd been reading since the 70s, the 35-year-old, whatever. I was a 30. What was I at that time? 33 by the time I was writing those books, between 31, 32, 30 and 33, let's say. I started reading X-Men with Giant Size X-Men #1 when it came out on the rack, and I was like 13 years old. So I was writing the books for the 13-year-olds reading them then, not X-Men so much as X-Force. X-Force was always intended to be for younger readers and be dynamic and exciting for younger readers. And it was, it was the older readers who whined about it, not the younger readers.
Yeah. So speaking as a then 12-year-old or 13 or 14, big thumbs up, success. You guys did it.
Sure. I know, we know.
Well,
Thanks.
good. I'm just going to add my name to the chorus. Add my voice to the chorus here. We really want to get to your new book. I just wanted to touch on something also that I thought was quite fun, and I hope you thought was quite fun when you were doing, which is Thunderbolts, which I think was recently announced to, be getting some sort of adaptation in the ever expanding, ever convoluted Marvel universe. What was your experience like on that book, and what would you like to see out of an adaptation to the screen?
My experience on the book was tremendous fun. I liked working on it a lot. I liked the book when I was reading it, when Kurt and Mark were doing it. I loved getting to work with Mark again because him and I click really, really well together. We enjoy working together a lot. I enjoy the characters tremendously. Hawkeye's always been one of my favorite characters since I was a kid. I hit the ground running. I felt very confident in the work I was doing. I felt very confident that the book was entertaining. I probably went off the deep end a few times with some of the tropes I was playing with regarding, villains and resurrections and things like that, but I was purposefully playing a thematic trope. I just overdid it sometimes, which happens with a team book because you're trying to do it for 3-4 characters at the same time. And I loved working with Patrick Zerker. I think he's fantastic. He was great. He's a great artist and a real good guy and a real professional. He never once whined or complained when I asked him to draw Fixer popping more equipment than he's ever popped in his entire life. And I did that to him every 3 issues. He'd be like, didn't he just pop more equipment than he ever popped in his entire life a few issues ago? Yeah, but he's popping more now. Okay. And he would draw it. He would just draw the living hell out of it. So I liked it a lot. I didn't like getting fired by some semi-brain dead young editor who was going to be turning the book into fight bolts. But I really enjoyed the fact that only lasted a few months and that editor got fired and they asked me and Kurt to relaunch the book. So I enjoyed that. And then I enjoyed working with Tom Grummett for a couple of years on what was a kind of a different book in many ways. And I enjoyed that too. I wrote almost 75 issues, I think, of Thunderbolts and its related miniseries, Citizen V and the V Battalion twice. So I liked it. It was a nice run. I feel good about it. I'm really glad they're collecting it. They're finally going to put out an omnibus, I think, of me and Mark and me and Patrick's work.
Great.
And I'm really looking forward to that because I haven't reread it in a long time, and I want a collected edition so that I can work it. So I liked it. This is a fun book. I'm pretty proud of it. It's in my top 5 probably for writing experiences overall. You know, I got fired from it twice, and I always was hoping I could get hired one more time just so that I could get fired a third time, because that, my friends, is an accomplishment.
That's something.
You know? If you can get fired 3 times from the same book, that's really saying something.
It's a
Now-
three-peat. It's rare.
I was going to say, speaking of writing books, I heard that you have.
Nice segue.
Oh,
Oh,
thank you. I beat you to it.
that was almost as good as my Phil Grayfield segue.
So you have a new book.
Yep.
Pardon me.
Should
There
be
we
able
go.
to do it.
Are we sharing?
Yeah, I can see it.
You're sharing.
Okay.
I know
Cool.
that guy.
Yeah.
So that's The Self-Made Widow. That's my new book, hardcover from Putnam. It's out right now. I'm going to stop sharing because we don't need to have it on the whole time. Okay.
Back to the
The-
Moneymaker.
It is the second book in what is currently a 2-book Suburban Dicks mystery series. We'll see if there's more. We don't know yet. And it came out June 21st from Putnam. And it is a work I'm pretty proud of. I liked it. I liked writing the second one probably more than the first one, mostly because I knew a lot better what I was doing. And I wanted to do something that was the same but different, and I got away with it. I did it. I feel like it's got a lot of similar vibes and feel and tone to the first one. It's the same characters, same setting, but it's got a different sensibility to the story, and it's a little more introspective for the characters. So I think I wanted to do almost like what you do in a middle trilogy. Is I wanted to go a little darker and have the characters reveal of themselves a little bit more. And to me, in my mind, although I have like 5, 6, 7 really solid, I think, book ideas for the Suburban Dicks mysteries, I did always think her story, Andrea Stern, the main character story, was a trilogy in order to get her where she needed to be. And she doesn't really get to where she needs to be until the end of the 3rd book, which I don't know if I'm going to write or not, because I don't know if I'm going to get to write it or not. Because now that I've written books and been paid to do that, I really feel like I would prefer to be paid to write a book rather than just write it willy-nilly. Just seems to make
It's
more
good
sense
logic
to me.
there.
And go figure, it makes more sense to my wife too. So we'll wait and see if there's going to be a contract on for more books, whether from Putnam or from someone else. We'll see.
Right.
I would like to write. I certainly would like to write more books. Period. But I would like to write more books with these characters, because I kind of want to grow them. I got their stories in my brain and have had their stories in my brain for so long that I kind of want to grow them. I want to see the characters, the kid characters get older. I want to see what they're like when they hit college, stuff like that, you know.
Was it always the plan to have a sort of continuous story? Did you know that your next book was going to be a continuation?
Well, you know what? The option was mine. It was a 2-book contract. Because we had multiple publishers bidding on the first manuscript, Suburban Dicks, in order to sweeten that deal, they made a 2-book offer. Rather than increasing what you're going to get for 1 book, they make a 2-book offer, which still gets you. It was a really nice contract. I'm not gonna complain about it. And if the next one isn't as good, I'm okay with that too, because I just enjoy writing these, and I'm at the stage in my life where that's luckily not as important as the ability to do it. I just want the companies to know I'm not going to do it for freaking free. Okay. So I always wanted to write a series of books. I'm a comic book writer. I come from monthly sequential publishing. I'm not good with one and done in that regard. My ideas tend to be long form development of characters, and always has been my strength. And my weakness too, quite frankly. So I always saw Suburban Dicks mysteries. Anytime I thought of an idea for a mystery, murder mystery, or anytime I thought of a theme that I wanted to explore, teenage suicide is a theme that I want to explore. My brain always went to, how do I explore that as a Suburban Dicks mystery? How does Andrea explore that theme? So yes, the answer is, if I could write 8 or 10 of them, I would do it in a second, and then I'd be over 70 years old and I could retire, you know. Let's put it this way. I ain't going to get through the whole alphabet. Not even poor Sue Grafton. Sue Grafton couldn't get through the whole alphabet. She passed away when she was writing Z, and she passed away. So you're not going to get me to do A through Z. At most, you'll get like A through L.
It's still not bad.
It's not bad, but I feel so bad for her and her readers. Like the thought of writing 26 novels in a mystery series and then passing away when you're writing your 26. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that make me an atheist. Okay, you can't convince me there's a God when that happens.
I was convinced you were not going to go for the alphabetical, but you're just going to go for different regions. Like it would be Suburban Dicks and
no, that's I think that we'd really be pushing it when I did like Tundra Dicks. There's a murder mystery in the tundra, and it's going to take 2 dicks to solve it. No. I just feel like because I'm writing about what I know, because I'm writing about the suburbs all around me, the town all around me. There's so many themes that about our living that I want to explore, and the entertainment hook for me to do that is through the mystery, and I don't even think of them all as murder mysteries either, because this book is a person who passes away of natural causes, and only the main character thinks it's unnatural causes, right? So it's not so much a whodunit, because there's no multiple candidates in the book. She sets her sights on one person as having committed murder, and she's going to prove that person did it, whether there's evidence or not. And as a result, I don't think of it as a whodunit. I think of it as a why done it. The first book was more of a whodunit, 2 whodunits at the same time. The third book is less. It is a murder mystery, because the third book would be her solving the murder of her brother, who was killed right near her when she was 8 years old and he was 11, but she never saw who did it. And that is part of the trilogy, because she can't become who she should be until she solves the one crime that she's never been able to solve and has always felt responsible for, was who killed her brother, her older brother. So that's a murder mystery, but it's really kind of not, in a way, because it's more about her coming to terms with her own obsessions and mania. The fourth book is 2 teenage suicides, simultaneous teenage suicides. So there's not a murder there. The book would be about trying to find evidence that the parents led their children or forced their children to the point where they committed suicide. All right. So you're not trying to prove that they killed their kids, because they didn't. Their kids killed themselves. Right? You're trying to prove extenuating circumstances that led to that, which lets me get into all the themes about pressure on high school kids and academics and all of that stuff. And the third book is the themes are all about parenting and the difficulties and complexities of parenting. And as a result of trying to solve her brother's murder, it calls into question a lot of aspects of her own life and her own relationship with her parents. So there. How exciting do those third and fourth books sound, Putnam? Let's go, baby.
As soon as they see this, they're going to be writing out a check.
If they're watching Dollar Bin Bandits, they're going to jump right into it. I hope
that's our core audience right there.
You need to tweet when you're ready to post this interview in the podcast. You need to tweet it to Putnam's and say, you should check this out. It may interest you.
Man's got a couple of ideas here and there.
He's got some ideas here, maybe.
Some, irons in the fire.
Yeah.
We think you should invest.
Oh, it's real. I'm in a really weird place, because I wrote Self-Made Widow in 2020. I haven't written a book since then, but I've been working on a truckload of other stuff. I just today I handed in at the behest of my agent, who represented me for the books. I handed in a middle reader graphic novel proposal that he wanted me to do, because he's selling middle reader graphic novels like they're water in the desert.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to do this, and I didn't at first, because it's a comic book. I don't care that it's a 180-page book. It's a comic book, and I've written 1,000 comic books. I want to write more books, But then once I got into it, because I had a bunch of different ideas scattered around here and there, and I sent him a folder that had a whole bunch of different ideas, and he said, I love this one, let's do this one. I said, okay, fine. And once I started fleshing it out, and then for the proposal for book publishers, they want you to do script, like sample script, not to show I can write, but they want to feel the tone of the book, you know. And I ended up doing like 40 pages of script for the project, because I did 20 at first, and the agent said, no, more script, this is great, I love it, more script. It's like, yeah, but you're gonna give too much, they're not gonna be interested. He goes, more script. I go, okay, fine. So I did like 40 pages of script for the proposal, for crying out loud. I told him, you better sell this, because I got a third of this thing written already. It's gonna take me 5 minutes to finish this thing. I really enjoyed it. I really, really liked it. The pace is different and the tone is different. It's a fun, sweet story about a kid who's trying to find a sense of place and family, and he's lacked it his whole life for legitimate science fiction-y reasons. And he's got to try to figure out the science fiction-y reasons before he can make the next step in his life. So I finished that today. I submitted the third version of the proposal today. Just went in. So, you know, I'm not sitting here waiting for the call from a publisher to write a book, but by the same token, I sure would like to, because it was just a tremendous amount of fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think when this episode comes out and we tweeted Putnam, your world is going to blow up. You better get those third and fourth ideas.
All I know is that if GP Putnam goes to Morton Steakhouse in Washington, D.C., I'm going to want a lot of people picketing and protesting there, so that GP Putnam, who's been dead for like 100 years, by the way, so that GP Putnam has to leave the restaurant through the back entrance. I want my fans to protest this. I'm going to give out my editor's home address. I'm going to give out the publicity manager at Putnam. I'm going to give out her home address.
Scorched earth, man. Just do it.
Scorched earth, baby. Yeah.
Exactly.
If reason doesn't work, then there's no reason why chaos shouldn't.
Go crazy. You have to.
And in the meantime, I mean, the graphic novels for, middle readers or even early readers, I mean, the graphic novels for kids in general we can tell you from, having my daughter is 8, Oren's daughter is a little bit older, I think 10.
Yeah.
And she just, at least my daughter, just eats this stuff up.
Yeah. No,
I
they're
mean,
selling
the old comics, the pamphlets, no interest.
It's a phenomenal business that the majority of the mainstream industry, both creatives, companies, and audiences are clueless about.
Yeah.
They're clueless about it. You could just see that through Comicsgate whining types, that they just have no understanding of what's out there. And I do, and I always have been. I always keep an eye out on what's happening. And I knew that the marketplace was really growing in the last 5 years. I knew that manga came through a cycle where it was really, really popular 10, 15 years ago, kind of died down a bit. Now it's huge again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm fully aware that these books are out there. And a lot of these books are getting optioned for development for television and film, and I get that too. My idea is very, very TV-able, as it were, and that's fine too. All of that's good. At the end of the day, though, for me, it's still a comic book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've written 1,000 comic books, so I can write 1,001, sure, but I would prefer to write book 3 or TV script 1. I just want to, do different things before I get Alzheimer's at 90, like my mom got. I can't write anymore. I only got 30 years left, damn it.
Yeah.
You got a while to go. Don't sell yourself short.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to read what I'm going to be writing at 75. Now, let me tell you.
Late bloomers, you can.
It's going to be pretty. Well, I sold my first book at like 58 years old, and it got published at 60 years old.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Well, Fabian, it's been an absolute pleasure as usual.
Always,
even
guys.
though this is the second episode, putting you through the ringer, we still have questions that we left on the table. So maybe we'll leave it open for a trilogy that, you know, finishes off your story until the legacy sequel when you are 75 and have written
Yeah.
even more.
There you go. Unfortunately, though, the way book publishing works, Mike, you won't have me back on again for like 4 more years, because even if they decide they want to do a third, I'd still have to write the manuscript, and then they still schedule it 2 years down the road. It's book publishing is just blows my mind with how stretched out that rubber band is. You know,
I hear you.
I submitted the first draft of Self-Made Widow in November of 2020, and it got published in June of 2022.
Yeah.
You know, and Suburban Dicks came out in 2021. I get you're not going to put out 2 books the same year, you know, but it's just that long lead time, you know. Even if I started writing the book tomorrow, I wouldn't be done with the first draft until probably February, roughly, of next year. You know, this one took me March to November, so it took me like 7 months, I guess, to do it. March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 9 months total, you know. And I'm at a point now where I feel so comfortable with the format, and I have the third book's like 80% outlined already, in terms of chapter breakdown, that I could hit the ground running and get it done quickly, you know. But that still precludes us from having a dollar bin bandit in like 10 months together.
True.
And you don't want to do
we
a
can
show
find
just
an
on my.
excuse. We can do a progress report.
We could. You're right. Halfway through, yeah. I'll read page 78 of the manuscript. And you don't want to do a dollar bin bandit just about my 7-page Nova story in Marvel Comunidades anthology, which is coming out in September. Although the art by Paco Medina and Walden Long is just sublime. It looks great, and Sam Alexander is a real fun character to write. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
So I got to do a little Nova story for them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was going to segue into any other, not that you're not busy with all the other stuff, but any other work or anything else you want to plug.
The image book I'm doing with Kurt and Stephen Mooney comes out sometime next year. We're not going to schedule it until we have like the first arc done, so that we know it'll come out once a month. And it's a pretty hefty workload book-wise. Free Agents is the name of the book.
Okay.
And it's part of a whole little world of titles that Kurt is relaunching or launching new, and he asked me if I wanted to work with him on this quite a while ago. It's been percolating for over 2 years, and I like working with Kurt. It sometimes it's like, you know, hitting your head against the wall, and other times it's like dancing in a field of lilies, and I like that about it because it's a good dynamic, and we've known each other for 30 plus years and been friends. So it's really good because it's kind of like, what if X-Force had an opportunity to not be X-Force? What would they be? So it's a group of interdimensional soldiers of different races who are stranded on Earth without their commanding officer, who was lost in the final battle they had. And they're on a planet that is not part of this interdimensional war that they've been a part of their entire lives. And they can't get back to that interdimensional war because they closed the breach behind them, which led them to Earth. And now they have to decide, who are we and what are we going to be? And for the first time in their lives, they are free agents, and they have to figure themselves out. And by the end of the first issue, there's a big monkey wrench that gets thrown into the mix, which is gonna complicate their lives even more than they already are. So it's interesting. It's all new characters, and it's fun to build something new from scratch and figure it out as we go along in a lot of ways, which is kind of interesting. We're discovering things about the characters every time we have back and forths and go through it. And Steven is starting to draw the first issue now, so I'm looking forward to starting to see some art come in as well.
That's awesome.
I can't give you a release date because I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm confident it'll be mid to late 2023 that we'll see Free Agents come out.
Well, fingers crossed.
Well, that's great. If you don't mind repeating, even though we have it on previous episodes, you know, where folks can find you, your fans want to follow all your good work.
Contact me anytime through my website, which is fabiannicieza.com. Hopefully soon to be the most misspelled URL on the planet. You thought typing out Prawn Hub instead of Pornhub was gonna was a popular miscue. Imagine what Fabian Nicieza is gonna lead you to. You can also get me on Twitter at Fabian Nicieza, Instagram F Nicieza, and through Facebook. My DMs on Twitter are always open as well, so you can contact me that way. Just don't ask me to read your script. So I am pretty accessible and easy to reach out on social media.
That's awesome.
Well, it was absolute pleasure to talk to you again. The book is The Self-Made, and now I'm gonna, Self-Made Widow. There it is. Fabian Nicieza, novelist Fabian Nicieza. We got that story from last time. Your neighborhood
Edgar and Seamus Award nominated author Fabian Nicieza, not Edgar Award winning author.
You're in contention.
Really, just being nominated is what.
That's what I hear.
Anyone can win, but being nominated—that's a lot harder.
That's something there.
You're on the short list there.
Yeah.
I was the oldest Edgar Award nominee for first-time American author this year. All the other nominees were substantially younger than me.
You're kicking open doors, man.
I'm kicking open doors for the elderly. Unfortunately, our legs are so brittle that we break and fall.
You're gently pushing open doors.
I tried my shoulder. Oh, my arm.
The doors may or may not open, but you're trying.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize because I'm so old. It's just like it's a door. I just need to step on the pad and it would have opened up on its own. I just walked into it. So yes, thank you. Self-Made Widow is on sale now. Suburban Dicks, the first book in the series, is on sale now. You can read the second book without having read the first book. I think that they work really well if you read them in order, but I have OCD that way. The book was written pretty carefully to make sure that you got all the information you needed to know about the characters moving into the book. It's already got like a 4.3 or 4.4 out of 5-star reader rating so far on Goodreads, which is the site a lot of book readers go to. Right. And not a single 2-star or 1-star rating yet, which is pretty good because that means no one's hating it. Suburban Dicks got about 100 2- and 1-star ratings, which I kind of expected because it was mostly white people who didn't like that white people were the bad guys in the book. That was I was kind of expecting that one. So there were a bunch of Kens and Karens who gave it 1 and 2 stars. But so far, Self-Made Widow, white people are loving it.
Yay!
Well, good. More reason for us to go get it.
Way to not screw up for a change, Caucasians. Woohoo!
You just give us the names of addresses that people give us 1 and 2 stars, and we'll go talk to them.
I don't, it's like I barely pay attention to it. It was Karen H. It was Jenna L. It was Leanna Q. It was.
Well, since we're white people, we know the other white people, so we'll get them.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was actually going to write a list of anyone who gave me a 1 or a 2-star review, just the name. And then during interviews like this, I say, I don't pay any attention to that. And read all of the names.
You can have a scroll at the end.
You can't focus. Yeah, scroll over my face. You can't focus on that kind of thing. And the names are running over my face as we're doing it.
And we're back. Great interview, guys. I'm sorry I couldn't attend this one. Fabian's a great guest. I really appreciate his work, and I really appreciate him telling it like it is. I was able to get one of his previous novels. I started reading it. It was Suburban Dicks. Yep. And interesting book. I believe as we discussed in the previous interview, it's kind of loosely based on his own experiences in his neighborhood at the time. So really cool job on this interview.
Thank you very much. Yes, wonderful guy. He and Ron Lim and Mark Wade, they're the returners, maybe a 3-peat at some point. Oh, and Ron Mars too.
Don't forget the Ron Club.
The Ron Club is an exclusive club. We've added Fabian to it. But no, he's a cool guy. And like Joe said, he tells it like it is. He's very honest about what was going on in his career, his thoughts on things. And for a guy of his stature to be that open, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we love having Fabian on. He may be the first three-peat. We're waiting on that list to see which of our returning guests is number 3, the first number 3. But for now, that'll do it. So guys, thanks for listening. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.